Hello, everybody. Although I'm trained as an artist, I'm not very good at drawing. Neither am I very good at computer skills. So, and in one way or another, my manners are quite big. So I sort of like created a sketchbook for me because I work as an artist over very long periods of time in communities. Let's say over sometimes 10 years of time. And in order to train myself in what it means to embed yourself into a community, I created what I call public faculty. And public faculty is actually a very simple format. I go to all kinds of places in the world, spend 4 days, 4 hours on a row at a kind of like abandoned site or a site where there's a lot of issues in public space. And I just start speaking to the audience, to whoever wants to join me on a conversation with a basic question: who should care? Who should care for our city? Who should care for your neighborhood? Whose responsibility is it? And as you see here, this is an image from Skopje in Macedonia, where I worked in an abandoned park, talking to whoever who should take care of that park, who should make that park again a place that everybody wants to come and join. And I have to say, it's not very easy to talk with the public. Like, especially sometimes the first 2 days, I'm alone on that stage, in this case also a stage, talking to nobody, talking to the trees, till somebody wonders, who is this woman that keeps asking, who cares? And then they said, like, yeah, I might have an idea or I might not have an idea, and then people start engaging in a conversation, and after a while they're not even engaging with me in a conversation, they're morally strongly engaging with each other in a conversation. And normally we try to write out or write down some of this conversation on whatever screen that is apparent, in this case just write it on the wall, and just use that to refuel the discussion. So do I get a lot of answers? I don't know. We have to make the thing more clean, we have to take the thing more safe, we have to take more care, it should not be commercialized. A lot of answers are the same. But to me, what is important in this questioning and this answering is exactly how people formulate it. Because it's in this formulation of every individual that you can learn how you might be able to together or collectively start thinking about organizing a project there. So that's just as an introduction. I titled my lecture, The Artist or the Designer if you want, but I feel I have to talk as an artist, has to decide whom to serve. And I think for me that's always been very important. I keep that in mind. For whom am I working, or whom am I working with? So, and the subtitle is Radicalizing the Local, and I will come back to that through the presentation. So the basics of my practice is the question how, working with my skills as an artist, within the complexity of our world, can I put myself to work in areas that are undergoing rapid change and that are under huge pressure from the forces of globalization? How can I be an instrument that makes it possible to collectively reimagine our daily environment? An instrument that works on self-organization, collective ownership, new forms of sociabilities, and governance. And that's sort of the only statement I'm going to make. So I'm going to take you to 2 projects I've been working on. One is in Rotterdam, the Netherlands. It's called the Afrikanerwijk. And I think you can guess why it's called that. And the other one is in Anfield in Liverpool in England. And Anfield mostly known for the people by its biggest football stadium. And what is actually quite important to say to you that in both projects I'm working with communities over quite long period of time. In the Afrikanerwijk I'm already working for 5 years, and in Anfield and Liverpool I'm just starting in my 4th year of working. And also I think what I do today for the first time is to present them in parallel. They have a lot in common, but they have nothing in common. So if you think like, why are those images together? It's just because it will help me to address some issues. Both of these areas have been subjected to sort of like large master planning, large, let's say, government designs about how the city or how that area should shape itself, and how the future should be how the future should evolve in that area. In Rotterdam, it was sort of like the city government thought of the expansion of the city center toward the south of Rotterdam in what they called the creative city. Rotterdam had to become a creative capital of the future. That somewhere started the end of the 90s. And in Anfield, they decided to actually change the area around the football stadium with a sort of like governmental scheme that was called housing market renewal. Now, what had these two plans in common while thinking about the future of that area is that they were both plannings, both schemes that were sort of like cooked up mainly in the government office. And they didn't involve so much the people in the areas. They didn't address actually the people in the areas. Because the Rotterdam South is not only one of the largest migrant areas in Rotterdam, but also houses one of the largest migrant areas in the Netherlands. It's also an area that traditionally had housed a lot of workers that worked for the harbor. And you could also say that when the city was thinking about making Rotterdam a creative city, and sort of you see in that drawing on the left that the city sort of encroaches upon the triangle, which is the Afrikaner district with an Afrikaner market, they thought really about importing creative industries from Amsterdam or even from America. They talked about, the Silicon Valley of Rotterdam, So, but the question is, if you think about a creative city, then what does that mean for the people that are living there? How can they become part of it? Or do we only want fashionable designers to move in to this kind of area? And in Anfield, the situation was that the government decided to demolish all the houses you see in order to build new houses. And somebody cooked up a quite interesting scheme. They said, like, okay, the housing market sort of like seems to not work in that area. So maybe it's due to these problematic houses that are there and the problematic communities. So why don't we erase all of it and build new houses so there will be new people coming and they have to take a mortgage in order to live there. So to actually sort of keep the housing market going, they cooked up this scheme. And I think it's quite interesting because that one says housing market renewal. It doesn't say anything about community renewal. So I want to keep these things in mind, like whose creativity do we tap in and for whom do we actually build? So some facts. What I said, like what's interesting about the Afrikaner district is that it is roughly 10,000 inhabitants, of which 85% is non-Dutch origin. You see that 29% is below poverty index, which is quite high for the Netherlands. There's a high rate of insecurity and unemployment, and also the most part of the area is social housing. But what is interesting is that a lot of the people in the area, 37% is younger than 23 years. Where the rest of the Netherlands gets grayer and grayer and grayer, actually the Afrikaner district gets younger by the day, which is also quite interesting. So why not tap into that energy or that potential of creativity? And in Anfield, that sign is there for 10 years. 10 years, and it says like, there's a future development going to happen here. Of course, that's a big promise, a future development is going to happen here. So your future starts there. The only thing is it stood there for 10 years, it didn't happen, and when the crisis hit in 2008, it's quite sure it doesn't happen. So the area is left with tremendous boarded up streets, partly demolished areas with signs says a development starting here. Few new built houses. Of the demolished over 4,500 houses, there are 78 new built. The rest is partly boarded up, partly demolished. I think what sort of like the community that was waiting for that future, I think what one of the members of the community I'm working with said, like, basically it made us sick. Sick of the waiting. Sick of the waiting for a future that is promised to us or that would be given to us, which will never arrive. So, and I think in my work that's also important, is actually how can we assist communities in order to what I call take matters in their own hand. Don't wait for the future to be projected upon them, but start working, start co-producing their own future. And in the Afrikaner market, you saw that with this idea of the creative city, a whole makeover was planned for the areas. There was thought of like we need pop-up shops, we need cafes, you need to be able to buy a latte in the area. You can buy very good Turkish coffee in the area, extremely one of the best Turkish coffee in the area, but you know, a latte also very important, of course, especially in the morning. So, but what went with this idea of the creative city is actually that some kind of invisible design started to happen. And I call that a visible design because most of my work in this kind of area is unraveling like sort of like the invisible legislations, codes of governance, social textures that are created, social institutions that are made, that actually are slowly preparing the area for that predicted future. If it's a scheme of, like in Enfield, of basically forcing people to sell their house, or in the Afrikaner district, which houses one of the biggest markets in the Netherlands, is put on a whole sort of like set of regulations that under the flag, what we say in Dutch, schoon, heel en veilig, kind of like governmental mantra, which is clean, whole and safe, put a whole set of regulations into effect that basically stifled the complete area. And shops were sort of like getting abandoned, the market run empty more and more and more, and less people were sort of taking part in the public arena. And as you remember that empty market picture from before, this picture on the left got an award-winning prize for public space design. So with those two projects, I think what for me has been very important is that you see that quite often residents are sort of like put in two positions. Either they can look at very nicely designed plans and say, I would like that, I would prefer the color red instead of the color green for, I don't know, my street lighting. And I make this oversimplified because it's just, or people are put into the role of protesting against government, going to hearings, going to public things, and they run into a very dialectical position with the council. And with both projects, I think what is sort of like, for me, is very important is two ways. It's sort of like what I call radicalizing local production, that find ways to tap into the existing qualities and existing talents in the area and to sort of like make them emergent, make them in a way sort of become visible, become almost tangible in space and become a shaping force in that space. And then the other things, I think, is sort of assisting communities to what I call take matters in their own hands, to actually basically not become sick of the waiting, but create your own drug, your own antidote, as I like to picture with all the drugs you should maybe take to prevent. So I take you to both of the projects now and then come back to the parallel. So with Freehouse in the Afrikaner district, what we did is actually maybe something quite simple. We basically went door to door, started to look for what are the local talents, what's the local creativity, what are the local skills available in the area on the one hand, and on the other hand is why don't we see them in our public space, or why don't we see them taking part in the cityscape? And we did that by doing two things. We first attacked the market, because I love the market. The market is still for me the agora, the place where you can first meet the other, smell the other, taste the other, get to know new things. It's also a place that is by origin an arena of public speaking. So, and the other one is like attacking the empty shops that are available, that are a lot in the area, and start to reuse them, reopen them. And as something what we think is very important there, and I from now on talk about we, because we are a big group of people. We are like 40 people working in our different co-ops, then another 40 volunteers. So we are a group of like roughly 80 to 100 people that work on a daily basis in this area. So attacking the market was one, then reopening empty shops with some of the qualities that existed. And what we did with in the Afrikaner market is sort of two things, which was one is important, was this sort of like test this invisible design that is around in the area that nobody sees. So test regulation. And I call that a form of like sort of urban acupuncture. It's like sort of like, you know, when you feel an area stuck, you know, you're stuck in a needle, and that makes sort of energy flow again. So what we try to do is just basically pinch sort of like sore points in the planning or in the regulation in order to find out why it feels that that whole area is stifled, or in Anfield, why people get sick of waiting. And I think that's sort of like important. So what we have been doing is two different things. It's like creating these small actions. We did over 300 actions almost daily on the market, which is on Wednesday and Saturday. Testing, protesting, demonstrating, presenting, retaking, in order to not only, show how sometimes ridiculous some of this regulation is, but also to gain momentum with the people, both the market sellers as people of the community, to sort of like gain a sort of force together. Because we unraveled roughly 100 conflicting regulations in the area by just quite humorous testing them. And I think, for instance, one, to give a very good example, is, there's a lot of like cheap fruit and vegetable sellers on this market, over 100 of the 300 market stalls. And they sell like fruit for €1 a kilo, so, which is like 100 rand or something. And of course, this is quite cheap, but it's also, they all take it as the low end of the market. So they have big competition. Now we wondered, and we spoke with this guy, and we said, like, why don't you at the same time put a juicer? And while you're selling your fruit for a kilo, juice a kilo of fresh fruit, make a kind of smoothie and sell them, because they go for €1 a package. So that's actually good business. That's making €5 from €1. And it turns out we did that for a whole day. In the Netherlands, you get a fine for this. Because it turned out that there is somewhere a regulation saying that the selling of fruit and vegetables is not the same as preparing fruit and vegetables. So you need 2 different licenses for that. But somewhere a smart person said, like, in a market stall, to keep things relatively clear, and you can only have 1 permit. So even if you have 2 permits, you cannot operate them in 1 stall. Now, if you talk about an area where food and eating well is not only very desired by the council against the fight against obesity and stuff like that, but in the houses there is a tremendous richness of food produced, used and resampled. It's very strange to have that kind of a regulation. And it doesn't say so much, but if you apply 100 of them in different layers, then it ends up with something that basically doesn't allow any business to thrive, or any experiment to thrive, or any form of entrepreneurial endeavor to thrive. You don't allow for startups. What we also did is looking at product presentation, how we can make things more attractive on the market. We invited young designers, artists, but also young people in the area to work with existing market stall holders to basically create other forms of presentation. I think quite popular was the Pimp My Stall thing, and especially the guy on the right, he was one of our first ones that sit, and he said, I always wanted a pink stall because I thought that women probably find that attractive. He's selling jewelry. He regretted since that day that he had his whole stall pimped, because of course in the market it raised a big discussion between him and a lot of the other sellers about, we always knew you were gay. So wish what you want for if you talk about product presentations. But also on the left side, there was an artist who spent the whole day hanging vegetables in this stall, as he thought it was very nice that this was sort of floating vegetables. And of course, the market stall holder told him, like, it's a great idea, but you spend from 4 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon doing this, so the day is over. I need to do my presentation in an hour straight in the morning, so, you have to come up with a bigger idea. But some of his clients refer to it as the flying vegetable stall. And a few years down the road, or a few years, like a year and a half down the road, I think he thought it over, and now if you come to his stand, he actually came up with a system to hang all his vegetables, but he does it in 10 minutes, so it's quite nice. So I think what is also very important is this idea of demonstrating skills in public. So we asked a lot of when we went door to door to look for these skills and for the qualities to exist, we basically asked a lot of these people to come to the market and demonstrate what they could bring to the area, what we would normally just didn't say. And by that, using the market again as an agora, where you test things, show things, try things, demonstrate things in public and can you learn about different trades. And this was in a shawl shop where we had a group of women in the area that have a kind of Tupperware party in their house where they show each other the latest versions of the hijab from Abu Dhabi to Morocco to Istanbul. And to do that in public, of course, adds another dimension to it, which I think is actually this dimension of confrontation, of using public space as an area where we confront each other on idea how we think we should live and how we want to live together. Because I think to think about more inclusive design, we have to sort of like find ways to confront each other with different ideas on what it means to live together, and from that point on, and take it from there. So we did a lot of that. Show what you can make through the catwalk, speak your mind, forms of public speaking. Now, I have to say, in the Netherlands, at this moment in time, this is under criminal act, and I have to make it quite explicit here, because since 9/11, we also have the fear for terrorism, and we have something, it's called an APV, an Algemene Politieverordening, which is a kind of anti-gathering law that the police can put in effect when when they expect big crowds and they expect danger within big crowds. And now it is very funny, the market is sort of visited by over 10 to 15,000 people from all nationalities. Of course, you put a terrorist warning on that kind of market during market days. But it's very strange to have an anti-gathering law on a market. That sort of like doesn't feel completely, let's say, the way it should be. But this is also a way to control differences, to be publicized, to control differences, to become visible. So we also did new products and stuff. And at the same time, what we did is that we sort of like I said before, we went into all these houses to look for the qualities, for the talents, and sort of combine them in collective products, showing them on the market, but also bringing them to all markets. And we at present, we are having 3 cooperative businesses in the area, one around food, one around clothing, one around services, and we are opening actually this coming Monday a 4th NGO in the area. And what I say for all the activities I'm doing in general, I think repetition is very important. Repeat, 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 and learn. Learn again, make mistakes, test again, retake, try again, and do it again and again and again. And I think for me that is very important. So also with clothing, looking for home qualities, bringing it to the market, starting a discussion on it, combining it in working studios, and also showing it to the world. And for instance, our clothes studio, we're not a sweatshop. We're not trying to make cheap t-shirts for whoever, H&M or somebody else. We're working with high-end designers, working on sample collections of them, where the skills of the different women and men involved actually sort of like are the basis of these new products. And this was a dress for Marga Wijmans, Dutch designer, catwalk show in Paris 2 years ago. And at the moment, which we are very proud, but I cannot show you pictures of, we are making 2 new dresses for Jean Bocotier's next spring show. So we learn also to combine each other's talents, to take lessons, to learn how to make our own patterns, to match design with skills. I mean, we work for things like MTV as well. But also feeding things constantly back locally, like that we did all the costumes for the choir of the mosque, stuff like that. And I think what is very important for Free House is that we keep demonstrating it publicly. And when we did our first catwalk shows and our first public speaking, you know, you had to go through endless weeks and weeks and weeks of sort of getting a permit to do things and then don't getting it and stuff like that. And I think you learn. That's what I said. If you come back, you learn about how to do things. And we just figured out, if you have an anti-gathering law, if you don't stop, and if everything keeps moving, then you don't create a crowd. And if the crowds move with you, you have actually, interesting enough, you have a form of movement happening without gathering. So, and since then, we parade our designs, our things, our food in processions. with a public shelter in front. And I think it's also, I show you just a small clip, as a bad clip of a mobile phone, but also you start understanding that by that, we're not only, creating movement, but we're creating a movement in the sense that people, of course, understand that, and that we are sort of like gaining as a group, we're becoming bigger and bigger and bigger, and you hear some of the market people. I think for us it is important that we use this sort of like what I call hit and run tracks, is this being playful in order to also gain momentum with the community, is to not only ask them, or sometimes I say smoke out, to present what they can offer to the community in public, but also see the fun in that, see the joy in that, see the joy of actually participating in sort of like the future of your own neighborhood. So I think at the moment what we're having 3 cooperative workplaces and a shop, and we are opening what we call a wijkwaardehuis, a cooperative value store, in which we actually combine most businesses and a lot of members of the community in one neighborhood co-op that actually is strong enough to maybe bid against the local government for some of the NEC plans that are cooked up. So, because we think we're honestly can do it better. So we basically, I think with Freehouse we say, for us the neighborhood has to be a cooperative endeavor. So I think that exactly the size of the neighborhood at this moment in time is the place where social, political and economical changes can happen. And we have to work on that specific size in order to think how we can create new coalitions, new forms of governance and new forms of ownership. And when I think back of the creative city, there's a certain image of what's successful and what's creative success. And I say we dare, as a group in the Afrikaner, so we in the Afrikaner district, we dare to challenge that image of success and offer an alternative image of success. So if you remember Liverpool, then, and this being sick of the waiting, which is sort of like the same thing is, basically there, we did it almost the other way around. We were sort of like, okay, we're not even going to be bothered about looking for whatever. We basically are going to take matters into our own hands. We're basically going to not sit and wait, but basically start building again houses, reopen some of these boarded up properties, and just build again for the community and for whoever's still left. And is doing nothing at the moment, just waiting. So we started quite simple first in the local community centers to talk to young people. Like if you were now saying like, okay, this whole housing market renewal scheme failed. So what would you do? How would you redesign things for your own community? Could you cook up a plan? Could you cook up a viable alternative? And then we combine them with clients. We combine them with skills, testing, and slowly, we sort of like started to build up a group of people that started to build. But in order for you to describe the situation where most of the people fell in, I'm just showing you Jane's.
So what ended up happening is we all know that it was a controlled decline, and that was the sad point, because my mum and dad have worked hard all their life, you know what I mean? They were paying a mortgage and they were 5 years from finishing it, and they were basically put in a situation where who's going to buy it? So they were forced into selling, and the money that they got for it was so small, they were then forced to take out another mortgage. And the best bit is the council gave them a loan of £30,000, which the best part is that they have to pay back after the dead, which in effect means me and my 2 brothers will pay it back. And to me, that is the absolute killer. It should have been 30 grand compensation for being subjected to this, do you know what I mean? Because they had no choice. Because who was going to buy it apart from the council? No one's going to buy it. So it took 10 years to basically bring the street to its knees, and there was nothing wrong with it. There wasn't a single empty. We all played out. As far as I'm concerned, there was no trouble, there was no bother. So we just watched it, and from what I understand and how I figure it, it's just a very simple thing, that it's about money. And there was a big pot of gold to the European Union, and in order to access that pot, the area had to tick so many boxes in the magical world of deprivation. So suddenly we were being told all the time that we were from this deprived area, and we were like, I'm not deprived, I don't feel deprived. We've all got food, we've all got clothes, both parents work, how am I deprived? But the more you feed that in, you pour, you this, that and the other, it's almost like you just watch the standards drop, and everything seemed to drop. And it took about 10 years, but they finally obviously ticked that last box that they needed to tick.
So, like I said, what we did is just to work with those people that were still left there and their children on actually like how would an alternative to all of this housing market renewal, to this government design for the neighborhood, how would that look? What would sustainable design be? So, tapping into local tenants, but also learning to ask questions to your neighbor clients. What is it actually that you really need? And how should a community house look? Because the new houses that were sort of like offered to the area, they were for 2.1 family. So 2.1 family is, I think, anything that doesn't exist in the area. There's like single moms with 1 kid, with 6 kids. There are families of couples. There is people that have their grandmother living in, but 2.1, not so common in the area. So to learn to ask this question is, what do we actually need? What is it that we need to build our future? And also then to start building confidence. Doing training in what it does mean to self-build, but not only self-build like physically, but also metaphorically. And then learning about scale, learning about design, and also unraveling the fact that quite often when these schemes are put into place, people are just said like, you know, and this is how it looks. And you can choose an option, like I said before, between this or that, instead of asking people to co-produce these different options, to learn from their knowledge, from their skills, what it is actually that they need or that we need to move on. And this learning collectively on how to take responsibility, to me, also always involved a lot of training, a lot of talking, a lot of discussing, and a lot of actually precising exactly, like, I need a house. Okay, but what kind of house do you need? So asking these questions again, and again. Sharing expertise. I do believe that we're all somewhere a local expert. You know, and local expert is not like, I don't like the word of saying like I work with the community, but I work with local experts. And if you live somewhere, you are an expert because you know what it means to live there. If you run a shop somewhere, that is sort of like also a quite interesting form of expertise. But sometimes you need to bring in external expertise, like in this case, an architectural office that would be brave enough for 2 years, work very closely with the community, and, you know, make all these calculations of everything they've been sort of like talking about. And sharing expertise, I think that's quite important. Which is also important that we sitting there in actually what is part of the former Mitchell Bakery, because the way we started shops in the Afrikanenwijk, I think it's very important for me always to set up shop, but literally to set up my camp in an area, to work from the area within, and to look for a kind of location that people can easily find the entrance to the door. And normally that's not the already existing community center, because that's already coded and it already has all its relationships and all its problems and all its enemies and all its lovers. So was to create a new space that is sort of like a ground for maybe starting some of the discussions again. And when we finally sort of negotiated that when the Mitchell Bakery closed, was one of the last shops in the area that closed, we sort of asked the family Mitchells if we could use their bakery to basically, as a space, to start literally working with the community on this building. And at the moment we are actually in the, recreating the Mitchell's Bakery into a full running bakery and training kitchen, and all the adjacent houses are with it. And just to give you an idea, the family in the front there is the Mitchell's family that just shared their expertise on what it meant running a family business in that area. But also you could see they're very old. So they waited 10 years for the government to buy their building. And then finally the government said, sorry, the money ran out, so we didn't do it. So they were left with nothing. And they're actually quite sort of like happy to be involved in maybe another life of their bakery, but also maybe also a different thing for their community plan, for their pension plan. So community building is very important. Tasting and testing on site. And I think discussing organizational form. Because what we are at the moment, we sort of like set up a land trust in order to communal own the land and the buildings. And we set up a cooperative business in order to run the bakery again, but also to deal with creating affordable loans and that kind of things. So, and in this project, I think what is very important in Enfield, that the way we say it there, we say brick by brick, loaf by loaf, we build ourselves. And it is a steep learning curve on how to do that, how to become advocates of your community, how to stop waiting, how to become, if you want, your own antidote, and just sort of like take matters into your own hands and become strong again as a community. So we even took it a bit further, is that in sort of like not only working on organizational forums, setting up cooperative structures in order to reclaim the land from the government and build houses again, but we also started to sort of tell the story of how a simple policy, design policy such as housing market renewal, what that does to a people's life, and how this non-inclusive shaping of the city is actually creates pure devastation. And we created a guided tour called the Enfield Home Tour, where you could take a bus from the city center and somebody would show you around to the area, but also to people's homes, in where they sort of like acted out their own stories about what it did. So like I said, what we are a community land trust and a community-run bakery. But more strongly, I think what we are is that we are a community development agency. We decided to self-develop the future of that area, as we do believe that home-baked is the perfect recipe, if you want. So here we thinking about the neighborhood is also thinking about small-scale alternative that we can co-produce together. So back to the beginning, and then I'm rounding up. Like, these are 2 slides, and I could take many, of how a government plan, how the image or the designed implication looks of that. And strangely enough, it feels not very inhabited. And I think that is also what it's lacking. It's lacking that people really inhabit it, that people really create a sense of belonging to it. Because I think in order for a person to be a citizen or to take part in shaping the city, they have to have a sense of belonging. They have to be able to create an image of the place where they are. They have to be able to become a shaping force in their area. If not, nothing will come of that. If that, we will only have spaces that are not clean, whole and safe, but that are cleansed, I would say. And what we do, we try to also talk a lot about it, present about the things we are doing, because public design, as I see it, is making local qualities emergent and reroute them collectively. And if we can do that in confrontation and in discussion, we might create an alternative to some of the bad policies that are made for us. Thank you.